You, you may be doing something really special or important, and you may need help getting the word out. We got you. Email us at guestwhopod@ppoisecm.com about advertising to our listeners.
Guess who?
Hosted by Maliek Blade.
This week's guest is
author, financial literacy advocate, and youth advocate, Jay Cameron. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Glad to have you on. So I want to share about your Maximum Impact Online Academy for youth and young adults. I think that is something unique that you have going on that's needed. And as we begin to have this conversation, I think if people don't see the need for it, that'll come out. So before we get to the Academy, could you share with us a little bit about why, before we get to what the Academy does, could you share with us a little bit why you decided to launch this online Academy?
I decided to launch it because I remember being a teenager as well as a young adult and trying to figure it out. I mean, I made so many mistakes along the way because I just did not know some of the basic things, the basic ways to conduct myself or just kind of how to think strategically as a teenager or a young adult. So it took me a long time. It took me really almost into my 30s to get my footing. And had I had this information on the front end, I would not have made half of the mistakes or more that I made. And I made a lot of mistakes. I messed up my finances. I didn't really know how to navigate interpersonal relationships well because I had a lot of issues that were unchecked. I didn't understand really what was going on around me as far as from a cultural perspective. So I saw this need, and in seeing this need, I had to create it. And the reason why I created it to be online is so that I could reach an unlimited amount of people. And that's the goal, to be able to reach people all over the world. And so what we did was we hosted some live workshops, and there were people traveling from New York City to Washington, D.C. to be a part of this program. And there were people traveling from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. to be a part of this program. So once I saw that, and as the parents were telling me that they didn't have anything like this in their area, and when I say this, meaning this is a very comprehensive online academy. This is not just, get good grades and go to school. This is really walking teens and young adults through strategy. So that's why, for me, that's why I created it, to give them what I didn't get when I was that age.
Okay. So a few things there. First, you discussed your personal experience as far as making mistakes. As a millennial, I have a lot of peers who are in a similar age bracket, and I know there's a level of pride that comes with having the freedom to make your mistakes. Some prefer to be able to make their mistakes because at least they had the right to make their own choice. I'm of the persuasion that if you can avoid mistakes at all possible, then do so. You can learn from the wisdom of others to avoid mistakes. You can learn from mistakes, but if you can avoid them, then do that. So because I say for millennials, but I think it's prevalent in all generations, this area of pride that wants to do it our own way. You mentioned making mistakes, but at some point you were making the mistakes in the middle of it. And then at another point, you were able to look at it and say, this is wrong. So what changed in your mind to recognize that what you were doing was not the correct thing?
Well, the result was the first thing. And then it's kind of funny. I was right around 23 years old. And I had lived enough life and made enough mistakes. And I knew that I didn't have time to keep making these same mistakes because I was going to, the reality is I was going to end up 30 years old soon. At 23, you kind of like, some 23-year-olds don't think like that, but I did. I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to be 30 years old and I'm still making these same like teenage mistakes. So I knew I needed to do something different. And when somebody says, I have the right to make my own mistakes, you're going to make mistakes for the rest of your life. That's it. The key is learning from the mistakes, because time is something that I don't think we value enough. I didn't value it enough at 18, 19. Even in my 20s, I didn't value it enough because I always thought I had more of it. Oh, I have more time. I'm young, I have time. But the truth of the matter is we don't know how much time we have. And so the thing is, now that I'm older, I'm of Generation X. Now that I'm a little bit older, I really appreciate the fact that I slowed down at 23 instead of waiting until 33 to say, okay, now let me get serious about this. And so I encourage, one of the biggest things that I encourage, either whether it's the youth that I mentor or my own children, is to take advantage of your youth while you're young. Instead of looking at it from the standpoint of, oh, I'm young, let me make mistakes. Let me look at it like, wait a minute, I'm young. I have the opportunity to lay a foundation so that as I get older, I can enjoy my life. I don't have to look back with regret and then say, oh, let me go back and, man, I wish I didn't do this, or I wish I could go back and change this. I mean, we're all going to have some of that just as you live and learn, but why do things intentionally or do things from a self-sabotage standpoint? And that's what we talk about in the academy. I mean, a lot of what you just talked about is coming from that perspective. And so for youth and young adults who want to maximize their lives and maximize each opportunity, they see the value in that. While some will say, hey, I want to go out here and make my own mistakes. And some of those mistakes aren't easy to bounce back from, because I talk to people my age and my generation, and I talk to baby boomers, so my mother's age. And you see where that mentality kind of is manifesting itself, because you see where they are in life. And you see where, had they just made a few decisions differently, or learned from some decisions, even some bad decisions, because I made a lot of bad decisions, even as a full-grown adult. But my goal was to learn from it and to improve upon it, and not kind of embrace the mindset of, well, I'm going to make mistakes and I got the right to make my mistakes. I do have the right to make mistakes, but I also have the right to learn from them and to improve upon the mistakes that I made, and to lay a better foundation. So it really just goes back to the mentality or the mindset that someone has.
Right. So I'll let the listeners in on this. Jay is not just any other guest. I've known probably Jay for how long has it been now?
Oh, you were like 6 years old since
yeah.
For either 4 or 6, one of the two.
Yeah.
I remember. I remember the little boy. I remember him.
Yeah. So it's been a long time, and I consider Jay a mentor. And I believe that with that type of titling, saying mentor and listening to someone, there comes a posture of not just learning from your mistakes, but also learning from others. I remember, you may not remember this, but I remember years ago, and Jay writes stage plays as well, but I remember I was around and you were in play season, and I had an idea and I wanted to do a play too. And I was a teenager at the time, maybe even younger.
Oh, I remember. I remember.
And I remember what you said to me at the time, and you didn't really expound on it, but I feel like that one statement, I pulled so many things from it. And I can share with you what I learned from it, but you can also share what you meant, because it might be interesting how we process through it. But I wanted to do this play, had a lot of zeal, and you said that you need to build something first. Nothing more, nothing less. You just said you need to build something first. And I think I'll say my piece first. I interpreted that over the years, and once again, because I knew you, I felt it coming from a good place, but I didn't completely understand it in the moment.
Right.
Now, however many years later, I interpreted that as you need to, one, understand what it takes to lead people and get people on board with the vision. And that requires work, people skills, consistency. And there's a level to which that's important to do before you are given a platform to speak. Because, you know, there were quite a few people in that DC, Maryland, Virginia area who were coming to the show. So, in me requesting that to do that play, that was a very large platform. And I think what I got from it was also that speaking to that many people is important. So, one, the sweat equity of learning to lead people before you can speak to a large audience, learn how to walk with individuals, but also the importance of you being, I guess, vetting what you put before people, because it's easy, and I can speak to this. I've seen sometimes that when people are impressed with someone's ability, they'll keep pushing them to perform without taking the time to consider how they are doing personally. So as time has progressed, I also saw it as not a, hey, I don't trust you, but a, hey, there are other factors that I think play a part in the final product of producing something like this for a wide audience. So it's important for you to work through those things and do that work, and build something independently too. It's not that you don't support and work with people, but I took a lot of, and that's just a few. I took a lot of things from that statement, and I bring that up to say that there has to be a willingness. One, you mentioned learning from your mistakes, but also an openness to learn from the wisdom of others. In that moment, you thought that that was the best thing for me, and I had to be willing to receive that. But it's so often, especially as men, we don't have that posture to allow another man to oppose us.
You articulated it perfectly. You captured everything that I said in that statement. I mean, and you broke it down, line item, you
Yeah.
subtitled everything. You articulated it perfectly, because I think you were probably around 16 or 17, and at this point in the journey, there were so many things that I had experienced along the way to get to that platform.
Hmm.
But I remembered the building phase that I had to go through. And really what happened, I had to help someone else build before I was even afforded the opportunity to build on my own. But the benefit of being able to help someone else build was that it gave me experience. And in that experience, it prepared me for that next phase. And so to even, take it a little bit deeper, because I mean, the way that like I said, you broke that thing all the way down. But it was almost like, I appreciated your excitement. And see, now here's the deal. You've built something. You've built many things. See, so that's the deal where you are now. I wouldn't have to have that conversation because you've already done it. You now understand the nuances that come with the territory of having platforms and dealing with people and personalities, and then the responsibility that it takes to have that platform and represent your message properly. And so, but again, whenever you're in the spotlight, and I don't think I was prepared for this in the beginning, you're going to attract people anyway. Because you're up there, you have confidence, and so it's a magnet. And a lot of times when you exude confidence, that's something that a lot of people wish they had. So sometimes, it attracts people. So with that phase and everything that was going on during that time, I knew that if you got out there too soon, then it would probably be more detrimental to you than beneficial. If you got out there too fast, too soon, without some of the foundational work being done. But here's the deal: you've been putting the foundational work in, and so if you decided to do something now, I'd be like, go for it, man, do your thing. I wouldn't, yeah. So it's and that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing with this podcast and so many other things that I've watched you do. You've excelled in everything that you've done, but the thing that you had and the thing that you did was that you always sought wise advisors along the way. And you just didn't go out there and just say, I'm just going to make my mistakes. I mean, I'm sure you made them, but your attitude was not, I'm just going to go out here and make my mistakes. I'm going to just do my thing. You, at every turn, I remember you asking advice on multiple levels. So yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So when it comes to one, learning from mistakes, but also learning from the wisdom of others, what would you say to a a youth or a young adult who may have already made some mistakes, may have already disregarded the counsel of others, and are now dealing with the weight of them of mistakes or bad decisions of the past. They're now at a point where they're dealing with the weight of that, and they want to move forward, but those past mistakes still have implications today. How would you counsel someone who's trying to now pivot and adjust, but there are still some remnants of past mistakes that are affecting their present?
Ooh, that sounds like me. You know, like when I was making the decisions, that sounded exactly like where my head was. I was like, my goodness, I've made all of these mistakes. Again, messed up my finances. I was a single father at the age of 21. I'd had a string of bad relationships. I had a lot of anger issues, just a lot of issues as far as trying to figure out who I was supposed to be as a man. It was just a lot, and I was carrying a lot around. And when I finally got to that place of being tired, I couldn't have a pity party about it. And I recognized that if anything was going to change, it was going to be up to me. It wasn't nobody else was going to do it for me. And to take the value out of the lessons that I learned from making the mistakes, because see, there's incredible value in the lessons that come from the mistakes. And my perspective started changing to say, okay, next time I get into a relationship, I need to be mindful of this. Here are some things that I need to be mindful about myself. Here are some things that I need to be mindful about what I'm doing with my money and how I position myself in that regard. So if you're at that place right now where you basically screwed everything up, now the only place now is to go from there is up and make better choices. Be really, really intentional and focused on the decisions that you're making. Surround yourself with the right kinds of people going in the direction that you want to go in. Instead of, just kind of, that's the one thing I had to do. I had to really separate myself from a lot of my familiar, quote unquote, friends. And they didn't necessarily understand it at that time. They were like, well, what's going on with him? But I needed to pull away from those conversations. And I wasn't trying to be judgmental. It's just that I knew I needed to position myself differently, because what we were talking about were the very things that was keeping me in that space mentally and physically as well as financially also. So when I pulled away from that and started surrounding myself with other people doing different things, going in a direction I wanted to go in, then that supported the goals that I had and the mindset that I was trying to develop. So that's one thing. And sometimes you got to separate yourself from your own family, because sometimes family will be the very thing that's, kind of dragging you down. So as you're going through that, don't allow yourself to dwell on the mistakes. Because if you start dwelling on the mistakes and replaying the mistakes in your mind, then that's another form of paralysis in a sense, because you're just kind of replaying, oh, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I did that. What I did and what I do now is when I make mistakes, I use that as fuel to get it right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would advise someone. Okay.
So let's flip that for the other side, for the person that's trying to speak to a person who's trying to make these corrections. I know that mentorship, support, guidance, being a sage in someone's life, it can take on a lot of different forms. And I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done bad. So could you speak to how to approach someone as the party who's trying to speak into their life in a positive way, how to approach someone and balance accountability for decisions made, but also being optimistic and hopeful for the future? And I say that because as far as the examples I've seen of it done badly, sometimes the person that's being supported will feel as if this supposed mentor is only throwing their past in their face. And sometimes throwing your past in your face can be misinterpreted when in actuality it's accountability. So for the person that's trying to be a fan the flame of progress in someone else's life, how would you recommend that they balance accountability versus also being optimistic and hopeful about change?
Great question. I would suggest to someone to always start with being empathetic and understanding where that person might be, because in my discovery is that it's easier to connect with someone when you can relate to where they are. And I think one of the mistakes that I've watched people do, especially when I was in my mid 20s to say 30, early 30s, where they came with a heavy level of criticism. And so that criticism, they meant well, but it was more from a condemning standpoint versus, hey, you know what, you're really doing some things well. Let me show you what you're doing well over here. You did a great job with this. I see a lot of potential, and I'm just kind of giving you a role play here in a way where you can kind of come from to highlight the positive things first, to kind of soften the person. And then when the critique or the criticism comes, to now navigate that is a way from empathy to say, I understand what it's like to feel this and to do this, but my concern is this right here. And I really want the best for you. And I'm saying this because I do care and I am your friend, but here's what I see. And then that opens the door. Of course, defensiveness may come from the other side, but now the door is open because it didn't start off with, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation. Now, I didn't like what you did here, and here. Now they automatically jump on the defense. But when that empathetic side, when the empathy is expressed, and then when there are some positive elements that come into it, now that person is willing to listen, because I can tell you that I had mentors along the way. And so some of the early on mentors in my adult years were very critical. And so the first thing they would do is just kind of come with the criticism. It was like, you knew the criticism was coming because it was like they were struggling to try to find something nice because they couldn't wait to get to the criticism. Mm-hmm. But then there was another mentor I had, and what he did, which was really, really brilliant, he didn't even talk about the criticism until like almost the end of the conversation. And his tone was, he was really, encouraging. So it was like he mastered how to do it. So of course, each person, some people you can go just straight at them and they're fine with it. But others, you got to kind of take that time and really discern where they are, and then bring that the critique or the criticism or the accountability. And so that's just a technique that I've learned over the years. And I've seen it work better because I know what it's like to go straight at somebody, and then you see the guards go up and the defensiveness happens. And so sometimes we can think to ourselves, well, all I did was deliver the mail. It's up to them. Well, what does it matter how I say it? It does matter. That's what I've learned over the years. It does matter how we say it, because people are just, especially now in this hypersensitive culture that we're in, where everybody's like, not everybody, but a large portion of the population, everything is, somebody's feeling shamed over something, shoe shaming somebody, somebody had on some raggedy shoes and all you shoe shaming. They had, there was a post on one of the social media, I think it was on Instagram, where one of the banks kind of posted some truth about that, if you cut this out, and cut this out, then you'll have some money in the bank. And so people were upset. So people were like, well, is this called broke shaming now? So it's like knowing that we're in a culture where everybody's sensitive about some of these terms, it's kind of navigating it to say, all right, let me see how I can be more strategic in my approach. But definitely do not neglect telling the truth, because true friends tell the truth to their friends. I like that. I'm gonna have to coin that. I'm gonna put a quote behind that one. True friends tell their true friends their truth or something. You'll figure it out.
No, that's good. That's good. No, I think I've learned that as well, that you definitely want to surround yourself with people who are real with you, not a whole bunch of yes men. Because if you're surrounded by yes men, then you overestimate your worth and ability, and you end up kind of looking crazy. I think about the people who would go on American Idol when it first came on in the early episodes. They go in those auditions singing boldly and sounding terrible. And it's like, immediately I knew you don't have people around you who are being honest with you, you know, and it shows. And that's a silly example in regard to singing, but I see that play out in so many other areas of life where it's clear that this person doesn't have someone in their ear because of how they act out.
That's right.
So in terms of the Academy, Maximum Impact Online Academy, we just addressed a lot of things from financial decisions to personal issues to communication with others to mental development and career. How does your online academy deal with all those issues?
Oh, we cover everything. Uh, I was actually on a call last night and I was showing people all of the lessons. It's over 150 different lessons, and we talk about all of it. We talk about everything from finances to mindset to recognizing and avoiding toxic relationships, the hidden landmines that life might present that most people don't think about. And sometimes the hidden landmines are within us. Talking about our friend, what about, we have a session called "What About Your Friends," and that's kind of like the play off the old TLC song,
Right.
but it's, I mean, family matters, dealing with the issues that families have, the dynamics, the blended family matters, the issues, the missing mother or father issues. And I actually wrote a book about that called Fatherless Fathering. So that's coming out real soon, because I didn't have a father growing up, or a father in my life, I should say. And so now here I am with 4 children. So how did that pan out? But, talking about the mistakes that people make on social media that destroy careers and reputations. And I mean, it is so comprehensive. Every time people see it, they're blown away, because it's the stuff that's not taught in schools. It's the stuff that many families don't even talk about. It's the stuff that people deal with every day, but they're wondering about these answers. Well, what about this? So it's really like a Q&A in a sense, because, obviously each lesson is a topic, but as people send in more questions, then we're able to add more lessons. Simple things. There's even a session that talks about personal hygiene. And that's not simple. That's a major thing for real. If you don't do that right, it can be serious. But that's a part of it for youth and young adults. That's something but it's kind of taboo for some people. You'd be amazed at how many families don't even talk about that. And someone's going on a job interview and they're an adult and they're like, well, wait a minute, what happened? Did someone not give that person the memo? And unfortunately for a lot of people, they don't get the memo. And so their hygiene is what keeps them from, climbing up the different ladders, whether it be in business or a career. And then really one of the biggest things I do in the academy is cast vision, as far as the importance of making an impact and leaving a positive legacy, because we all have a certain amount of time here on earth. And so what impact are we going to leave to the generations that come after us? So it's deeper than just practical knowledge. Yes, we get that. And how do you, there's another session called 5-Star Career Training. I've hired a lot of people in my career, and I can tell who's going to get the job and who's not going to get the job, or who's going to get the opportunity. I have entrepreneurship training, because I'm probably what you would know as a serial entrepreneur. I've been one since I was a kid. And so I'm big on that, creating financial independence and making wise financial decisions, and showing people how to go to college without taking out all of these massive student loans, and positioning themselves to really be successful, not only financially, but from a family standpoint and a social standpoint. That's why I say it's so comprehensive. And it's the stuff that I didn't get. It's the stuff I wish I would have had when I was 15 years old. And would I have received it then? I don't know. I mean, it's all about the culture. So if somebody embraces this and they make it a part of their culture, then the value of this academy is priceless, because it talks about the things that are oftentimes ignored when we turn on television or even in our everyday conversations.
I see. I want to potentially save some folks here. Some of our listeners may be about to get caught up in some stuff, or already caught up in some stuff, and a word shared might help save them. So could you drop some gems for these particular scenarios? Let's talk finances first.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, a lot of our listenership is millennials. What is a common financial mistake that is made, and what can be done differently to correct it financially?
For millennials, one of the common financial mistakes is lack of planning and not really having a lot of urgency as it pertains to finances, from what I've seen. Now, of course, I don't make blanket statements, but in general, what I've seen is that there's not a major urgency And a lot of millennials are battling this whole student loan deal. And so it's kind of like they're letting that hang around and they're not really being aggressive with paying those off. And I think that what has happened, not quite as kept, a lot of millennials are approaching 40. So, that's you got two different phases of this whole millennial journey. So,
Yeah.
That's what I'm noticing. There's not, for some now, because I know some really sharp millennials that are out here getting it. They're doing their thing. I mean, millennials like you're out here making moves and positioning yourself. But when it comes to that financial component, that's huge. That I see that a lot. The lack of planning and the lack of really understanding the importance of their financial position in a capitalistic system. We're in capitalism here. In most modern modern countries, capitalism is what fuels it. And so if we're not careful, we can have I don't want to say ego or emotional compensation without having any financial benefit. So we'll have the education under our belts, as far as the degrees and everything, but we won't have any money. Or we'll have, we'll kind of be in that space where we have we're popular and we have a good name and people know us, but we don't have any money. So it's like having both, get the education and make sure you position yourself to have a few dollars in your pocket for the future.
Yeah, because having money is not a bad thing, and being driven about getting it, I don't think is a bad thing either. Sometimes I think it gets demonized, but I think it's important to be practical about, to have your needs met.
Well,
Like
let me say this,
capitalistic society.
Oh man, let me say this, because I used to be one of those people that kind of felt as though if you had money, that somehow there was something wrong with that. But then as I got older, I was like, there's something wrong with me struggling and having to work overtime and just to barely survive. I said, there's no real joy in that if I'm away from my children and this is the life that I have and I'm, my health is being impacted. So at that point I said that there's nothing wrong with having resources and the ability to do nice things. And anybody who comes to me and tells me something different, chances are, that's their conviction. That's their business. But I've learned, I just got tired of being broke, man. That's the bottom line. I just got tired of being broke. And so that was it. And I'm not greedy. It's not like I'm running around. It's like I just would like to live a nice life and have resources. And my conviction on that, when I'm watching people, if you invest properly, then and you are conservative on some levels, meaning from a financial perspective, you can do well. And so that's a whole nother conversation. We have a whole nother talk on that. Yeah.
Okay. What are some pitfalls you see romantically or relationally, and what can be done better?
A lack of training or improper training. Because if you turn on TV, everybody moves so rapidly into relationships emotionally and physically without even knowing the person. And then we get into these dynamics, especially if children, become involved or become a part of the relationship. And it just, that's the one thing is I look back, there was no solid relationship training to say, really, really be careful with your emotions and really protect what's going on in your heart, because you don't know this person. And so as I reflect, the reason why I would find myself in so many negative relationships is because we had familiar situations, familiar issues that we were dealing with, whether it was rejection or abandonment or insecurities or anger. And so I would find myself constantly in those types of relationships. So what I would recommend is to really take your time and not just get caught up in the euphoria of someone accepting you or telling you that you're attractive. And that goes both ways. That's for guys too. Guys, we like to be told that we're attractive too. But ladies and gentlemen, when you're kind of going through that, to not get caught up. That's what I would say to anybody, a teenager, a millennial, a Gen Xer, or a baby boomer, because it happens at any age. And as I'm talking to more and more people from all of the generations, to include Generation Z, that's those coming after the millennials, Um, I'm just seeing how this lack of relationship training then turns into dysfunctional families, because you have these people who are dealing with their dysfunctions, or have not dealt with their dysfunctions, hooking up with somebody else who has not dealt with their dysfunctions. Now they create a dysfunctional household or a dysfunctional environment, and now that trickles down to the children. So that's my relationship advice. Take your time, get to know yourself, work on the issues that you know, and then you become healthy. And now you will actually look for a healthy person to be in a relationship with, and you won't tolerate being abused. You won't tolerate certain things because you're focused on being healthy, and you want to have a healthy relationship and a healthy household when you decide to get married, if that's what you decide to do. But you want to be able to model that.
Absolutely. So for anyone who may be interested in connecting, it may be a person that said they need it personally, or maybe a parent that hears this and says, oh, I need to connect my son or daughter with these resources. How do they connect?
Well, I'm on all the social media platforms. On Facebook, they can find me at J Cameron Official. That's where I am, J Cameron Official, as well as on IG, Instagram, under J Cameron Official as well. They can also, I'm on Twitter, J Cameron, the number 1. And then I have my website, jaycameron.com. That's Jay. That's Jay Cameron.com, and Jay on everything else. But I'll say this, I do have a session for parents, and it's called Empower Your Teen, Secrets of Successful Parents. I do offer that as a part of the academy, because we offer parental support, because if you give it all to the kids and the parents are still trying to work it out, it makes it difficult. But what we're doing is we're creating a community and a culture where we're all working towards the same goal. So the parents are getting the support that they need, and that's why I wrote the book Fatherless Fathering, and that's for men and women. And then the kids are getting what they need, and we walk them into adulthood. So we don't drop them off at 18. We're like, no, we're going to follow you all the way until your 20s. And then once they get into their 20s, then of course we have more resources available. So that's where you can find me, jcameron.com. And I look forward to connecting with your audience.
Thank you for your insight. This is Maliek Blade, and that was Guest Who.